Good morning. Welcome to the Explicit Measures podcast with Tommy, Seth, and Mike. Sorry, I was a little slow on the uptake there. Good morning, everyone.
When you said that I would be doing a lot of this, I'm like, I didn't know alone.
Good morning, everyone.
For those of us, you listening on the podcast, we started with Tommy staring angrily at his mic all by himself as the other images popped up on the screen. It was great.
You're welcome for that one. This is a little Thursday morning gift for you.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, no matter how early in the morning it is, that intro just gets you.
Get you every time.
It's the blood pumping. I like it.
Whoever
chose that, he's so amazing.
I know.
Handsome,
creative genius, the creative
kind
of the world.
The greatest man. What is that guy who was like was it Dos Equis, the guy, the most interesting man in the world? I think he made it.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, we don't necessarily.
That's great.
Even though we've gone through 197 episodes now, and we've not missed one. We almost missed one.
We almost did.
So severe technical difficulty. Right?
So it actually found out I use all my hotspot for the month in a day because of it. But it turns out
I'm sure this is okay. So for historical evidence here, or historical purposes, Tommy's internet went out and he had no internet at his home for like what,
a day and a half,
2 days. A day and a half.
Yeah, it was pretty bad.
And you're basically hotspotting in from your phone to call in, like first time, long time listener, first time caller kind of thing.
The only way to actually get a solid internet connection, I had to leave my phone upstairs. So then that's where the cellular connection could come in and then connect out.
And Wi-Fi downstairs to your computer.
Yes.
Oh my goodness.
So I wasn't thinking about this past episode, like the previous episode where you had connection problems, because we would have stumbled on with the most boring show ever without Tommy, right?
That's true.
For sure.
It would have been very boring.
But I forget what episode, but it took us 20 some minutes old platform. Remember? Because we couldn't get it. Yeah, you couldn't get it up.
Yeah.
Oh,
he couldn't get the program. Like, I think you would uninstall and reinstall, and we were 25 minutes late, and we still had some folks joining us. So,
but we never missed. And it's
if you remember what that is, comment in the chat. Remember which episode?
It's the episode we were 20 minutes late on.
Yeah.
For those of you who are listening, this episode is actually a pre-recorded episode. Tommy and I will be at a conference. We will be actually at the SQL Bits conference. So we have pre-recorded this. We are there. Come say hi. Tommy and I will be roaming around and hanging out, talking about Power BI things that we love to do. But we will be over in ICC Wales conference for SQL Bits. If you would like to join us, there still is time, I believe. I think you can still go to the SQL Bits website, and you can actually get a discount code. So if you want to join us at the SQL Bits conference, you can get a discount code for SQL Bits by using PowerBI.tips 5 is the discount code.
Probably those of you who are a little bit more local to us.
It would probably be local. You're not going to travel very far.
Yeah.
If maybe you're in London, you went to train over.
Someone in California is like, there's still time.
Let's get a red eye all the way over to the SQL Bits conference. Excellent.
That would be amazing.
It'll be fun. We'll see. I've never been to one. I'll see how it goes. Apparently, there's supposed to be costumes involved. Tommy, what's your costume?
Observer.
I'm going to be a probably someone who wears a lot of Power BI gear.
Guys are weak sauce.
Weak sauce. I'll just wear my shirt.
I can't believe it's actually. I guess today is Thursday, right?
Today is Thursday.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just to level set.
So at this point, I'm sure all my slides are in order and in the right format.
It is Thursday, and Tommy's still scrambling
to much better.
Fix this presentation. What is your talk on, Tommy?
It's on goals. It's on metrics.
Power BI metrics. Excellent.
Yeah. So it's
like how to use it. Like
the
best
first
practices?
40 minutes will be whether or not you should use it. No.
Okay.
It's all about selling people on goals, and it goes back to our conversation about not necessarily we'll do a demo on setting it up, but why is it so important? What goes into it? Like, what's part of the recipe of your culture of your company using it, and how can you get started using it? And just to show, then we're going to show some demos. We're going to show some of the integrations, how easy it is to use. So
demos.
It's
to-
probably my favorite session to do now. So
Oh, oh.
There's not a ton of people talking about Power BI goals or metrics, I guess would be the appropriate name now, right? That's kind of like
yeah,
the only person I've really heard jump onto this would be
Trev Gaddy.
Trev Gotti.
Yeah.
So that's the only other person I've really heard really jump on some of these the goals ideas. So yeah, it's good. It's a good topic. It'll be fun. I'll go there and I'll make sure I heckle for sure.
There's a few slides for you. Don't worry.
Boo, OKRs, boo.
Yeah. We don't need to measure anything.
Yeah, that's exactly. My Power BI report can do the exact same thing. All right.
That's funny.
That's enough for the intro pieces of things. Today's topic is kind of around the Power Automate visual and how do you use that inside Power BI desktop. So maybe I guess we should, Tommy, give me a quick introduction. What is Power Automate and how does that concept connect to things that you can do inside Power BI?
Yeah, so Power Automate is part of the Power Platform, Microsoft's Power Platform. Again, just to quick recap, there's Power Apps, which is business apps integration input. There's virtual.
Let's be real
agent.
though. Power Apps is really just dynamics, right? I mean,
Absolutely not.
It's an app
Absolutely
building.
not.
What?
It's app building
What?
for dynamics. It is,
Okay,
isn't it?
I got another session then. Let me
Oh,
put it in
boy.
the top board.
I mean, it does other
not
things.
even close. Not even close, my friend.
But it's so closely tied to like the dynamics ecosystem.
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously some integration, some synergy.
What do you mean integration? Everything runs on Dataverse, which is literally dynamics.
That's not true at all with Power Apps or Power Automate. You can run everything off SQL, SharePoint, your own API.
I know, but I'm just saying. I think it was made. I mean, looking at it, going, what does dynamics stink at? Making custom screens and automation of stuff around business processes.
So
let's build Power Apps to make it happen. Oh, and by the way, we can hook it up to SQL. Great. Let's sell something else too.
My friend, we're gonna have to have a special demo together.
All right. Enough of that one.
Anyway, so Power Apps, which is two kinds: Canvas apps, which can do anything.
Yes, correct.
And then your model-driven apps, which are more what you're talking about.
Maybe I'm thinking about a model-driven app. Yes.
So then there's Power Automate, which is basically Microsoft's solution to like anything that has to do with automation, from triggering, like if someone, if this then that, so to speak, but for the business. But it goes to very enterprise, even into small business, to any triggers that you can imagine. The same connectors that you have in Power BI, you can use in Power Automate as a trigger, like when a new row is added to my SQL table, and basically set up the custom actions for what you want to happen. If you can literally create your own SQL jobs using Power Automate, but it takes a little more configuration, but it also does everything so much more in terms of approvals, integrate with your systems, integrate with APIs. So it's an automation system built for the business, in the same way, low code, no code, that allows you to automate everything that you would really need to at a business, but set up from a business user point of view.
So, I mean, that is I think you get a certain number of Power Automate flows or executions with your, what licensing do you need to even start with?
It's more the type of connector you use.
Is the connector basis. I know you can get like a handful of like free stuff kind of out of the box. So you can just start creating Power Automate options. So as far as Power Automate, I see it hooked up to a couple different areas, right? So you can Power Automate on top of SharePoint, right? So if you have like an approval flow for a document, you can have a Power Automate hooked up to that, right?
Yeah.
And then I've also seen it when I look at Power Automate, it looks very similar to Logic Apps, which is a bit more of an Azure-based.
Very similar.
Yeah, it's like an Azure-based version of a Power Automate, which I think would make sense, right? It's using basically most of the same bits under the hood, I presume. And it feels a lot like Power BI in the way that you have to authorize, like the same way you authorize a data set, right? You sign in to the data set, you have authorization to be able to use the data set, and it uses
the gateway.
Yeah, it uses your credentials to like run.
Right.
And the Power Automate does the same thing. Like if you're connecting to a SQL server, you have to enter some credentials so it could talk to it. Or if you're running it on your email, like every time I receive an email, I want to forward it to another inbox or something along those lines. But you have to sign into your email address, and then it sends things on behalf of you as it sends things out. Does that sound kind of right?
No, it's 100%. So it has the same connectors. However, if you're using most connectors, you do need an on-prem gateway for even if it's for a lot of the cloud or like your SQL databases. It
Yes,
requires, and the same with Power Apps. Power Apps and Power Automate are much more closely related than Power BI is.
I would agree with that. That sounds
Yeah.
very fair, how they've been building the product.
Right. But there's thousands of use cases from anytime a new product's added, send a notification, a review process, business, if there's an email or like you said, the document added, let people know.
Yep.
So all those use cases, it's a powerful platform. Don't get it confused with the other what people always seem to confuse it with. I don't remember the name of it, but it's like UTF or
Oh, UDF, user defined functions.
yeah. There's another tool out there that people try to confuse it with because there's another side of Power Automate which is kind of like desktop automation, and that's what people
Oh, RPA, I think is what you're
RPA.
speaking.
Yes, RPA. Yeah. But
Robotic process automation, I believe is
right.
what that stands for.
So it does it, but it's really, I think the real true feature set and the real true quality of it is in its cloud automation.
Yeah, and again, that's RPA is. I've done some experimentation with that. It will help you. Basically, you could script, or you can then record like clicks on a screen
Right.
on a website or something, and it will do the same process every single time. I think I saw a demo of someone paying their monthly electric bill by using RPA. They would log in. It's little. If you think about paying your bills online, it's literally a series of clicks that you're trying to get through to get done to pay that bill. And some systems can schedule the payments automatically. Some can't. And so you can use, robotic process automation to sign yourself in. Click on the button. Click on this. All right. Type in this number here. Boom. Hit pay or whatever. And so I think I saw Reza Dorani. I think it was the gentleman who was doing that, but it was absolutely incredible what he was able to accomplish
Yeah.
inside the RPA side of Power Automate. So Tommy, that's a different program, right? When you're talking about RPA.
Yeah, there's like UiPath. That's kind of like the big ticket name out there.
Oh,
That's like
yes.
more the robotic process automation.
Okay.
But I think for the sake of today and what really integrates with Power BI is the cloud, or what you'd consider the business automation.
Yeah, I don't think I would actually. I don't think I would quantify RPA in our conversation today. That feels a lot more. Well, you can't technically bring an RPA into Power BI Desktop.
Right.
You can't bring one of those automation scripts inside.
Yeah. So it's available, but we're not going to touch on that today.
That's a good point. Good distinction there. Any other features around Power Automate? Any recent developments that you're aware of, Tommy, that have been recently released? I know there's been a lot of features. They have a ton of connectors. So
Yeah.
I mean, that's one of the advantages, is it can do basically anything. And then they have all these things called templates.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one of the other things that I find very interesting around what they're doing in the Power Automate space is they have all these connectors, all these automated flows. There's tons and tons of templates that are out there. So if you search for what you want to do, odds are something is close to what you want to produce. Follow up on a message in
100%.
Teams, send an email, or when I receive an email, save it to a OneDrive or other things. So I thought that was pretty cool.
So if you want to talk about updates, they're doing a lot with Chat GPT now. So
inside Power Automate?
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
So if depending on what you want the output to be, you say, hey, I want the output to be this. You give a few examples and it'll pretty much try to recreate that in action. But I think the biggest thing for today, and from why would I use it from a Power BI point of view, is let's say your connector is not available out of the 250 that are there. Well, all you need is a open API or the Swagger JSON file of like basically your documentation of what your API is supposed to do. You can upload that to Power Automate and create your own custom connector. So really, it's more than So it's more than just the standard connectors. If yours is not available, too bad. You can actually create your own custom connector using an open API or open API Swagger file.
Interesting. And not every API. So in a Swagger file or Swagger information is usually around documentation around how the API works.
Yeah.
And gives you descriptions of get, puts, posts.
Or you can upload
updates.
Postman too.
You can upload a Postman thing. See, now we're talking. I like Postman.
Yeah.
See, what's interesting to me is where I got stuck is a lot of the licensing stuff, right? Like they've simplified that in Power BI, but this is also where I think the RPA conversation comes in, because that's part of this at a certain license level, right? You get
Yes.
you get the ability to set up RPA within those flows. What is the general consensus? Like if my general cost is $15 per user per month, are there restrictions on like what other users could benefit from it? Or like it seems like Power Automate would be great from a user perspective. If I'm going to automate certain things within my workflow, my business workflow, is there some hook, kind of like with Power BI, where I share a visual, share a report that the other user needs to have a Power BI Pro license or something like that?
It's the author. So it's whoever's creating the automation is
So it's
basically
just an author, and then whoever it gets sent to doesn't need a license or like anything like that. That's valuable.
I kind of feel like, I mean, again, if you're thinking about like process automation, right? There's a person who needs to do grab the information, do the stuff, and then it outputs something at the very end. It's different in the fact, like when you think about Power BI, when you start talking about like a workspace, we need multiple people to come together to the same workspace. So they're requiring everyone to touch that workspace have a license.
So I'm not familiar with Power Automate. I live in enterprise space for the time being, right?
You're like all Azure functions kind of thing.
If I'm creating a Power Automate to say, sort my email, like whatever, can I create a template and like give that to somebody else?
Oh yeah.
And like just so I could have a user that is proficient in Power Automate creating templates for the organization to use and basically create time-saving techniques for everybody.
100%.
As long as they had a license.
100%. So you can actually export the file, save them, basically easily upload those solutions, or you can add it to a Power Platform solution itself. But yes, you can create the template and then save that template with others.
So how many different is Power Automate on the same or more connections as Power BI as far as like integration perspective? Like there's a lot, right?
Yeah, I would say at this point,
because
I would say this. No, I would honestly, I think, like I said, don't quote me, but I would say at this point, because they're so closely aligned with Power Apps and Dynamics, I would say there's probably more connections now in the Power Platform than in Power BI.
I would agree with that.
Right. Okay, which is great, because if you think about tools like this, right, this almost strikes me as like a business systems integration, right? Like I need a ton of third-party connections. If I'm going to be able to, like to Mike's point earlier, like if this was created for Dynamics and SharePoint, like there are business process flows, there are alerts, there are approvals, there are things that need to go through. And if this is the solution to that problem, the more third-party connections I have, the more people are probably apt to use it from the standpoint that it would solve their problems.
Right.
And I need this in, like when this kicks off over in this application, I need to know that this is going to happen, or it kicks me an approval and then I say yes, and then it goes back up to whatever the case may be.
And I want to emphasize too, the Power Automate, and I think especially Power Apps too, they've come to a point now where they're not just nice to have for some businesses, where they are truly business dependent. A few projects that I was able to work on, those automations now, if they were to break, I will get an email at 2 a.m. because those need to get fixed, because they are so dependent on what the business or the process or what the company does.
Yes.
And generally speaking, they are reliable. The debugging is great. But again, I want to emphasize that they're not just like, oh, it's neat because I can sort my emails now. Like, well, it's a nice feature. I use Automate personally for notifications from folders in Outlook that I may not would get a notification for, or a few other things too. But businesses are using them now. And like I said, I've personally been part of a few of those projects where they are dependent on those automations running. Either both on triggering or schedules.
So there's a couple things that I've been wanting to get more involved with, and again, Tommy, feel me out here to see if this is in line with what we can do. Some of the things that I think are very interesting would be scheduling things from like an automated media sending list, right? So being able to like automate your schedule emails or automate, because I run a class now around Power BI data governance, and so there's a lot of like, okay, on the Mondays when we have these events, I need to schedule these events like further out and say we're going to be live, and we need to let everyone know what's coming up. So scheduling that ahead of time and just having it send the email automatically is helpful. Or
Huge.
Sending things out like on Twitter or Facebook or other social media platforms where you're able to sign in and say, okay, here's my message. I want to just kick off this one message, and boom, it goes. And then it can pick up content and assets from like a place where you would put the information, right? You could have like a list inside SharePoint of what you're going to like the schedule of things you want. And then you can have like images and links to images that can then get absorbed into the message that's getting sent out to these different platforms.
Oh yeah, and I mean one of the cool projects was anytime someone signed up, it would basically populate a Word document with all the required information, create that file, and then send that file in an email.
Interesting.
Yeah. And with all the information based on who the user was, pull from another system, and then all those variables would basically auto-populate this Word template. I mean, in terms of like, this was thousands of documents that would be sent out. And if you thought about what would you do without the system?
Well, I'm looking at the update here on their website. So there's like enhancements so AI is getting used in everywhere, right? So everyone's trying to put AI in every single thing now. Yes, exactly. so exactly. But one of the enhancements here is talking about advancements in AI Builder. And it's talking about using the Microsoft Power Platform, particularly Power Automate, to do document processing, like you're saying. So like, I'm going to get a PDF of an image, an invoice or whatever, and I can absorb content on that image using the extract information right inside Power Automate, which I think is pretty dang sweet.
Yeah. And I think the power of this too, and really I think when we think about, okay, how does this apply to Power BI there's a few triggers that we'll really speak to. There's obviously when something happens, like let's say something's added to a document library, something's added to a row, or it could be when a user clicks on a button. For example, in Power Apps, you can set up the trigger when someone clicks on this button, then
do a thing.
But they have scheduling too. So like every 8 a.m. every morning, run this and check this. But I think the big one is the integration. I think it came out in 2001, the visual in Power Automate or in Power BI.
Yeah.
Where all you have to do is set up a button. Basically, you can actually add columns and rows of data to the Power Automate custom visual, which I don't know if it's technically custom now because it's already built in Power BI. Like if you open a new, right?
Yeah, but I think it's also, but it doesn't come on the window, the panel.
I think it does now. If you were to like uninstall Power BI and then reinstall, I think it's part of. I don't know if you have to.
Is it a preview feature you have to turn on so it shows up the icon? I'll have to double check on desktop.
Yeah.
But you're right. It's now you can literally see the Power Automate icon inside Power BI desktop. It's just there.
To do anything.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. There's no extra adding. Go find it on App Store or something like that. It's basically now built into the product to some degree.
And just to get started using it, all you'd have to do for any user, all you have to do is add columns to the data, and then you set up the automation within Power BI. So super easy, but all a user has to do is click on the button, which would trigger whatever the automation you want to do.
Right now, to see if the preview features have any turning on or turning off Power Automate. It looks like no, I don't see anything there I don't see anything inside the.
Yeah, I think it's pre-baked.
Okay, so it's there now. Part of it is desktop. So help me understand that though. I remember previously when it came out. Again, I remember how it kind of progressed into getting into Power BI desktop. Initially, when you had the Power Automate icon, you had to be in the service to build Power Automate things. Have they resolved that, and is it now built into like when you go into Power Automate in desktop?
Depending on your Web G2 or your web.
Oh, that upgrade.
Yeah. So on my desktop,
Yes.
it doesn't work, but on my laptop, the PBIX does work.
And what's the difference between the two environments you have? You have one desktop on your desktop computer. On the laptop, it does work. Which one has the? You don't know. It's just turned on, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't.
Isn't it the
Sometimes,
version of
yeah.
Windows?
I think it's part of the version of Windows. Generally speaking, you're going to want to set it up in the web, I think, just to stay safe.
Okay, yeah, that's what I've. But oh man, that drives me nuts though, because I don't really love to configure things inside the website. I mean,
I'm not well.
I understand why, but I'm like, I don't really want to configure it in the website because I want it. I want the local files. I want the PBX file to be local on my machine. That's where I do my development.
That is my most frustrating thing with the Power Apps one, because if you want to test how it's working, you have to be connected to the web. So then you have to anyways, but the goal, regardless of where you're setting it up, you can still set up the button and still set up the data points in
True. You can kind of stitch it all together. And
right.
I think what you're speaking here too as well is if you select things on the report page by adding a certain data field or columns into that visual, you can pass data from desktop into the Power Automate visual and do something with that information.
Exactly.
Yes. And I think that's pretty dang cool. That's the same thing that actually happens with Power Automate as well. Similar, right?
Yep, so very similar. Exactly.
You can bring in the Power Automate visual and then bring your app into Power BI desktop, and you can pass data or filter context between what is happening in desktop to what is actually inside the Power Automate frame, if you will.
And that's
that is powerful.
And that's and I think I want to speak to that. It's not just passing data, it passes all the filter context or whatever you're filtering. It knows that and basically creates, in a sense, that data model or that data set that whatever is going to pass to Power Automate. So if you were to select a row or put a few filters on, and then you were to click the button, that's what's getting passed to Power Automate.
That makes sense.
So in your experience, when you're integrating stuff in clients, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you find that it's more in personal efficiencies that people are implementing, or is it solving a business process problem, right? Where like we have manual steps that are happening between teams, and this simplifies, some organizational process.
So for Power Automate solely or with Power BI?
Both.
So Power Automate solely, I would say it's business process, the integration of business systems.
Right.
And that goes along with obviously the process that they have, but it's improving their own personal team process. But it's much more, I would say 80% is improving systems integration, improving how systems talk to each other. So
that's what I would expect. But it's typically because the ball gets dropped, right? Somewhere along the line, something gets hung up. Teams that creates confusion. Where are things at? Like you're constantly syncing and trying to figure out like where things break down. But the intriguing thing to me is like I think about like all of the different areas I could potentially utilize from a time saving perspective and drive. Like if I had one, it's almost like the thought here is it almost seems it's worthwhile to have one individual in an organization that is just there to like build efficiencies, right? Like, and you can do that, right? Like, hey, we want to create some standards around how you respond to email, right? Or we want to create some, when you're interacting with these tools, you're going to get notified when somebody drops a new file in your SharePoint folder, or, whatever the case may be. It seems that there's so much noise on a day-to-day basis, I think, that like there's this thought I'm going to start thinking about more where like, hey, I wonder actually if Power Automate should be part of my, repertoire as far as utilizing it in ways that would provide efficiencies for me. But then if that's extensible and it's a template that others could implement, that's really valuable.
Yeah. So first thing I would say is, speaking from personal experience, probably more than one's good to understand the tool. In case
it's always good to have a backup.
It's a really good practice. Yeah. But I think the bigger thing too is, I mean, I got to the point, and this is part of why I moved to the consultant side, was people like, what do you do? I'm like, oh, I'm business intelligence. Like, okay, what do you do? I'm like, oh, I basically responsible for how data is integrated, automated, and analyzed, because I was doing the Power Platform, and that's basically what the Power Platform is. So it's trying to find solutions for all of that. Like, oh, you're doing this 18 times and trying to talk to these systems. Well, Power Automate's good here. Well, let me ask you guys a question now. So obviously, I think we've seen how rich Power Automate is, and for both of you, like you said, you may have not used Power Automate a lot, but I'm surprised in the community that I haven't seen more examples of Power Automate and Power BI working together. There's a few demos out there. There's a few.
Are you though? Why?
So we've just, well, I'll ask the questions now, and then
Hey, who's asking the questions here? I'm asking the questions now.
Yes,
You
Tommy.
shut up and let
Sorry,
me ask
Tommy.
the questions.
I'm gonna ask a question now.
Let me ask a question.
Well,
if
you
you're
asked
done,
this.
Tommy.
Yeah.
Okay.
No. But no, honestly though, I am surprised, personally speaking, because we explained how feature rich and what Power Automate can do, and to me, it makes sense that they work together.
I think the number of use cases are wider than people understand. And I think it's another one of these areas of, I don't understand how much time I'm wasting when I do certain things, right? I think it's one of these, I don't know it was even possible. Like I'm literally going to the website on Power Automate, and I'm looking through all the templates that are here, and I'm just reading through like the template descriptions. For example, I just search for Power BI. Anything with Power BI in the flow, see what it's doing. It's talking about like, update an Excel table from Power BI, send a Teams message from Power BI, trigger an alert in Microsoft Teams when a Power BI alert is triggered. So basically using the alerting system of Power BI to then trigger the flow to then do something else. That could be very relevant, I think, when you're talking about data sets not refreshing or not loading correctly, right? If there's an alert based on a data set that has to be incrementally loading or something, you're checking to see if new data appeared today. The alert can be said, okay, no new records appeared. The record count is 0. Someone needs to go look at something. Post a message to Slack or channel when a Power BI alert has been triggered. Export a Power BI paginated report for items in a SharePoint online list. What I found was there's a couple other ones here, like look at Excel in a list of paginated reports, copy each one of them to SharePoint, and then email them out. Like there's some incredible amount of automation around like the paginated side of things. So this is the concept of like, I need access, just give me data, send data to me. And it sounds like a lot of these flows are kind of geared around towards those kind of things as well. So I guess, Tommy, to answer your question directly, why is this not being used more frequently? I think it's not being used more frequently because people don't understand the impact, or people are just used to doing their normal job and not saying, I'm going to spend a little bit more time to learn how to Power Automate this thing. So I don't have to do that same thing over and over again. Like, one thing that I have example for is I need to alert multiple people when a form is filled out on one of my websites. Well, if that form's filled out, I need to know about it, and somebody else needs to know about it because there's potential action to be taking place there. So having a Power Automate that is doing something to enable that makes tons of sense.
Right.
I agree with that, but I think there's some nuance here as well, right? Because why we don't see demos, I think, is because our breadth of focus and our roles don't branch into this area typically, right? Because to me, this is the difference between business integrations and processes versus business intelligence, which are two different roles within a company. And what's interesting is your description of your previous business intelligence role seemed to include quite a bit of like
automation,
automating processes. Now, do we do parts of that, like for data movement and ETL? Like, I mean, it gets a little muddy in there. Like, if I need to pull data from over here and put it somewhere else, are you using Power Automate to do that? Or is it more alerting and business process flows? and we need to stand up something in order to develop reporting. Like, I get it, but at the same time, I think a lot of our focus is more around pulling data in from systems into Power BI to report on it versus building platforms of
Yeah.
automated processes that make the business operate better.
So I think that's an interesting take, because I firmly believe we had this conversation like in 2021 about what role is a BI developer going to do, and we said from that conversation, we said there's kind of like a hybrid approach of either you're a full stack developer with Azure or you're more towards the Power Platform. And I really do believe that anyone who's in Power BI is going to eventually fall into one of those two categories, where just doing Power BI, fine, but I think your next step from being a Power BI developer is going to be one of those two roles. Either you're going to be
So I agree with that, but at the same time, like that's also a distinction between you saying Power BI developer on an enterprise team versus a business unit.
yeah,
Because you're going to have to solve different problems in a business unit without the aid of enterprise tooling at your disposal. And this is where Power Automate and different tools allow us to figure those things out, because or have tools to do so, right? Power Apps, Power Automate. These are business side tools because they weren't they aren't available on the enterprise, like to those people, but
Yeah.
they are available on the enterprise side.
No, and I think even with Power Automate, so yeah, from the enterprise point of view, the probably full focus is on Power BI. But honestly, setting up an automation with Power in Power BI, you don't need to be, let's say a certified Power Automate developer. You can do a lot of straightforward, simple automations with maybe just using Power Automate for the first time. Honestly,
So and that's awesome, right?
yeah,
But like I guess my point would be, on the enterprise side, you're learning different skills.
yeah,
You're working with different tools
Mhm.
that are not Power Automate, right? Because
yeah.
the to me, a it is a business side tool, right? Like, and it
Mhm.
depends on the size of the organization, but the larger you go, the more data volumes you're going to have. Like, you're going to be in Azure services or big
Okay.
platforms that force you into using tools like Azure Data Factory, Databricks, Azure SQL, whatever the case may be, and that's how you operate, right? So your BI developers have to learn skills in that ecosystem to move data around, push things. It's got to be in a much more kind of standard code check-in, multiple environments way kind of thing, as
Mhm.
opposed to, I'm in a business unit, I need to have connecting of this data. This is part of our business process. We're doing things with this information. I need to be alerted at certain times. I need to, streamline my efficiency because 500 things are happening
Mhm.
in a day. I'm building
Mhm.
reports, et cetera, et cetera. And that's the distinction in my mind, and why it's important when you're talking to people, like, to figure out where their experiences lie, because I think they, as report authors or report developers, those are two different worlds.
I feel like also, and maybe I'm off base here, but I feel like another point of this is, um, there's a concept around, like, as every app that's being built nowadays is coming with an API. Like, doesn't matter what we're talking about. So we probably should think about, like, as everything becomes more API driven, this whole like Web 2.0, Web 3.0 thing is coming out kind of right now, right? So as you think about the everything that needs to be built today is less about servers and running hardware on the back end. It's more about like serverless, function-based things, API-driven stuff. And so one of the
Mhm.
main challenges with any data system or any software is getting data to move between different systems. And I think as more companies are continuing to build more APIs to talk to their data systems, whatever that may be,
Point.
I'm seeing like a lot of this Power Automate stuff kind of like connect very well. Like, oh, by the way, there's already a handful of APIs that everyone's building. So
Right.
companies like I don't know how to explain like the different web versions, but like, Web 1 was like, hey, look, we have a website. You can contact us on a website. Here's our phone number, right? Web 2 is like, okay, we're going to be able to buy stuff. Like Amazon becomes popular. Web 3.0 is, every company builds APIs, and you can now more seamlessly move data between these different systems. And so with the prolific use of APIs, you now get a whole layer of automation on top of all these existing software suites. And I think that's why I'm seeing this being to be so valuable. But you're right, Seth. I think I agree with you 100%. There's like this lens of this world there's a lens that is full dev, right? I'm building custom code and functions to do this stuff, or I'm looking at the business side and letting the business do things as well. And so I think we're also fighting this dichotomy. Like we need a tool that kind of blends the two together. So, anyways, I thought I'm as I'm reading up more about this, hearing you guys talk, I'm feeling like there's this merge happening, right? There's the opportunity to automate more things is now ever more evident because of all the APIs that are being built into every single app.
And I'll make the argument too. I think Power Automate is going to be closer to Excel in terms of like a business user tool than it is to Azure.
Okay.
If you were to look at that,
comparing anything to the usage and adoption of Excel is pretty.
Well,
you want to bet a dinner on that?
Okay, I'm saying if you had the scale of,
we're talking about like, are people using it, and you're comparing it to like the most used business tool in the world.
Fine. Okay, so let's say we had a scale, and this will be our bet then. On one side is VS Code. We'll say VS Code. Okay. The other side is Excel. Where is Power Automate? Is how far on what side is it?
Capabilities wise, like it could be the same thing as like Power Query, right?
Yeah. I would say from who's using it, it's going to be closer to Excel. Not necessarily completely right next to it, but I think more people who use Excel would use Power Automate than VS Code.
I think I think the value of Power Automate all the way up through this visual in Power BI is awesome. Like if I had time, I might carve time, because like if I can create an automation, and part of that is a visualization of data, and I would be taking action off of that to automate some things. That seems like such a time saver.
And that's the crazy thing. Give yourself 30 minutes. You don't need that much time.
All right. You sold me tonight.
I will say this too. I have kind of come into Power Automate using a couple of templates, kind of, scratch, not learning a lot about it. It is pretty straightforward, and it's pretty good as long as you can start figuring out the basics of it.
Yeah.
Okay, so I did be able. So this is the segment of the podcast where we do, what does ChatGPT say? So the question today was, why use Microsoft Power Automate? And so it kind of talks about a little bit like, okay, it's a cloud-based tool, blah blah blah. The main reasons you might consider using Power Automate are the following 5 reasons. You save time. Power Automate can reduce the need to have repetitive tasks such as data entry, file organization, and email notifications. Increase your efficiency. Helps you streamline your business process by automating workflows. Improves collaboration by automating workflows between apps and services. I think that was my point around like API doing things. Like everything is an API now, so it just all kind of talks together, or it has the ability to talk together. You need some kind of tool in the middle that kind of like moves data around between it. And last 2 items here, maybe a bit more suspect. Enhance productivity. Power Automate allows you to create custom workflows. Okay, fine. Gain insights. Power Automate provides analytics and reporting features that allow you to monitor and analyze your workflows.
Yeah, I mean,
okay.
Yeah.
Anyways, so pretty good stuff. Overall, I think ChatGPT, I give that one, of your response, ChatGPT on this one, I give you about a 5. Yeah, it's okay, but it's not didn't knock my socks off. So maybe you do better next time in ChatGPT, 3.5.
You get turbo.
Then turbo. Yeah, we need a little bit more turbo on that one. Excellent. Well, you've burned a perfectly good 45 minutes or so with us. We appreciate your time and your listenership. We really, really appreciate you participating. What we really want to do is we would just love to continue to share what we're doing in the podcast with the community. So if you like what you're hearing here, if you're finding some value from it, please share it with somebody else so we can have them engage the conversation as well. Tommy, where else can you find the podcast?
You can find the podcast anywhere it's available. Apple, Spotify, YouTube, Google, anywhere that you can find content. You can find us. Just look for PowerBI.tips.
we'll be out there. So look and check us out on the Explosive Measures podcast every Tuesday and Thursday, 7:30 a.m. Appreciate it.